This is South Africa Tonight on ENCA, and Gautrain passengers are in for a rocky start to the week, with Numsa members at the rail service set to go on strike from Monday. Wage negotiations between the parties have reached a deadlock. Let's get more on this then and speak to Numsa spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, who joins us by Skype. Phakamile, good to see you as always. First things first, will you indeed go on strike Monday morning?
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners, to your viewers rather. Yes, indeed, as of tomorrow morning, we are warning all Gautrain commuters to use alternative transport. Our members, who make up by far the majority of workers at Gautrain, will be on strike starting tomorrow morning.
And it's interesting that the strike is now going ahead on Monday morning, because when I heard you speak on Friday, you were saying, yes, there is a strike planned for Monday, but you were still hopeful that there could be a change as far as negotiations during the weekend period. Why has there not been progress?
Well, that's a question you should ask the management of Gautrain. We've been very consistent in the statements we've issued, in the communications that we've had, and even the reasons that we've put forward for the strike have been primarily because they do not want to engage us during these wage negotiations. We began discussing wage talks in the middle of the lockdown. At some point, those talks were suspended, and then we resumed again in June. But instead of us having an actual sit-down across the table dialogue, they cut short the talks, they threatened to lock out our members, and then they sent out a written communique saying, we're offering 4%, that's it, take it or leave it. That is not how you negotiate. And that's all we've been asking for, is an opportunity for meaningful engagement. Even if it's true that they might be experiencing financial difficulty, which is what they're claiming as the reason for why they're imposing this 4%, no employer has the right to simply impose changes without meaningful consultation. And this is why we say that they are provoking the strike. If they wanted to stop the strike, they simply need to pick up the phone and agree to meet with us, as we've been saying, let's meet so that we can talk.
Let's talk then about your demands. How much do you want from Gautrain?
We have proposed 8% increase, and this was based on what we had achieved last year in the talks with the employer. And the reason we've said 8% is because we want to cushion the lowest earners, who are at 8,500 Rand a month. We believe that 8% is more meaningful, but we are open to negotiation. We want to work together and see if we can find a meaningful compromise for both sides. On
the compromise then, Phakamile, what are you willing to concede? What are you able to move on during this process?
Well, we've already moved, because our initial demand was a double-digit increase. So really, I can't at this stage exactly say what we would be willing to compromise on, but we would certainly be willing to sit down and talk, for them to give their reasons, for us to give our reasons, to see where we can find each other between the 4% and the 8% that we're demanding.
Final question, how sustainable is the Gautrain model? I mean, before the pandemic, we were already hearing that it was basically a black hole as far as money is concerned. There's more going in than what's coming out, right? We've heard that since the COVID-19 lockdown and the pandemic, ridership has dropped about 14%. When you look at the future, how sustainable is Gautrain as an employer for your members?
Well, I think if you look broadly at the South African public transportation system, we have to have a viable, efficient, and affordable public transportation system. I think it would be wrong to discount any form of public transportation in South Africa, because we already struggle to provide reliable, efficient, affordable transportation to the majority of the public. Most people depend on taxis. Taxis are not necessarily everywhere and at every workplace. There are many, many workers who are forced to walk to work because of the high cost of transportation. I think the more important question that we should be asking is, how do we make transportation more affordable to the public in South Africa? The average worker spends more than half of his or her income on public transportation alone, and this was before COVID-19. And I think if we can get to the bottom of crucial, critical issues like that, we can go a long way towards actually dealing with the serious financial shortfalls that many working class families are struggling with today.
Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, spokesperson for Numsa, their members going on strike at Gautrain tomorrow. Thank you very much for that. Let's stay with the story now because I want to bring in Gautrain spokesperson Cassidy Naiga, who's joining us, as I was saying, by phone. Cassidy, a very good evening to you. Thank you for being on South Africa tonight. So you've heard Numsa there. They're saying, well, you've basically negotiated in bad faith. You're not willing to negotiate. You're saying all you have is this 4% and nothing more. Why?
Good evening, Thembekile, and good evening to your viewers. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I must just say that we have to reject the allegation by Numsa. We have been, in fact, negotiating. Negotiations with Numsa was underway since early August. Numsa initially demanded a 15% increase in basic salary, and in addition to that, increases in allowances. So the total initial demand tallied to approximately 30%. At that stage, the company offered 2.2%, which was rejected by Numsa. The company then revised the offer and tabled a 4.1% offer. Now, Numsa also revised the demand, and that equates to 26%. The 8% that has been mentioned was not tabled by Numsa. So as you can see, we are far apart in terms of what is being offered by the company and what is being demanded by the union. And it's for this reason that wage negotiations basically deadlocked. So in our view, it's disingenuous of Numsa to claim that the company has not engaged with the union.
Okay, so you're saying initially the negotiating position from Numsa was above 20%, right? Well, Phakamile is now saying that they are sitting at about 8%. That would have been a figure, in fact, carried over from the period prior to this as far as the wage negotiations at Gautrain are concerned. You're offering 4%. Where between 4 and 8% are you willing to settle as Gautrain?
So I think, Thembekile, the important point that we have to make is that we must consider the total cost of the increases to both basic salaries as well as to the allowances, because it is ultimately this is the financial cost to the company. It's not just the increase in terms of basic salaries. So Numsa surely should know this, and they need to clarify if their demand is 8%, which is inclusive of allowances, an increase in allowances, or is it an 8% increase on basic salaries alone? I think we need to, to find middle ground in terms of that upfront before we can possibly return to the table.
So what happens tomorrow then? Because the strike, by all accounts of Numsa, they say they're the majority union, and their members will withdraw labour come Monday. So what are you going to do?
So we do have a contingency plan, which we'll implement as of the start of business tomorrow morning. We plan on delivering a train service to our passengers. During the morning and the afternoon peak periods, we will have trains available at every 30 minutes, and this will be on both the north-south and the east-west lines. And in addition, to increase our capacity, all trains operating in the peak period will be 8-car trains, and we have implemented additional security measures as well. I must also stress that the bus and the minibus service will not be affected by the strike, and these will operate as per the standard schedule.
And at this point, from Numsa, this is an indefinite wage strike. Can you sustain a long-term disruption? Tomorrow is only day one at this point.
Yes, so tomorrow is day one. We have this contingency plan in place, and the plan is to implement it as of tomorrow and hopefully improve on the service as the week goes by.
Cassidy Naiga, spokesperson.
I can't confirm anything further, unfortunately.
All right, apologies for that. I did lose you there slightly. Cassidy Naiga is spokesperson for Gautrain. A strike set to begin by Numsa members come Monday morning.